I still remember the sound of the rain that day, heavy, relentless, like the sky was mourning with me. My hands trembled as I stood in front of that old wooden door. The key Daniel left me felt heavier than metal, heavier than any promise we ever made. The wind howled through the trees, whispering secrets that had been locked away for years. And as I turned the key, my heart begged me to stop. Because deep down, I already knew whatever waited behind that door would change everything I believed about him. And about us. But before that moment, before the silence, the lies, the death, there was love. The kind of love that blinds you. Daniel was everything I'd ever prayed for. Charming, patient, the sort of man who could make you feel seen even in a crowded room. We met at a friend's wedding. I was the maid of honor. He was a last-minute replacement for a groomsman who couldn't make it. He spilled wine on his shirt right before the first dance, and I helped him clean it off in the hallway, laughing as he fumbled for words. Something in the way he looked at me, a mix of apology and amusement, made me feel like I'd known him forever. He asked for my number that night. By the next morning, he'd sent me a photo of the sunrise with the message, "New beginnings are always beautiful, aren't they?" I should have known then. He was poetic in ways that didn't always make sense, but his words had a way of wrapping around my heart. Our relationship grew quickly, maybe too quickly. Within 6 months, we were living together in a cozy apartment overlooking the river. Mornings were filled with burnt toast and laughter, nights with whispered dreams and promises under dim yellow light. I had never felt safer in anyone's arms. He'd brush a strand of hair behind my ear and say, "You're my peace, Evelyn, my home." But peace doesn't last forever. It never does. One evening, as we sat drinking wine on the balcony, Daniel mentioned a property he owned, a small countryside house about 2 hours away. "It's just a place I go when I need to think," he said casually, avoiding my eyes. "A family thing, passed down. I go there sometimes, alone." I laughed it off at first, teasing him about having a secret lair like some movie villain. But his expression changed. He grew serious, almost pleading. "Evelyn, promise me something. Don't ever go there, no matter what." "Why?" I asked, half joking, half confused. He hesitated. "Because it's private, it's complicated." Something in his tone made me drop it. I wanted to ask more, but the way his eyes clouded told me not to. We had just moved in together. I didn't want to ruin the fragile happiness we'd built. Still, a small seed of unease rooted itself inside me that night. The months passed like a dream: birthdays, small weekend trips, lazy Sundays watching movies. Daniel loved taking photos, and our home slowly filled with framed memories. The beach, the cabin, the city lights reflecting in our wine glasses. I thought I knew every version of him. Until the first time he lied to me. It was subtle. He said he had a work trip. But when I called his office, his assistant said he'd taken personal leave. I told myself not to overthink. We all need space, right? But when he came home, his shirt smelled faintly of lavender, a scent I didn't wear. That night, I couldn't sleep. I watched him as he slept beside me, his breathing steady, peaceful. I wanted to shake him awake and demand answers, but fear kept me silent. What if I was wrong? What if I destroyed something beautiful because of my own paranoia? So I pretended everything was fine. Because that's what love does. It teaches you how to lie to yourself before you ever learn how to lie to someone else. The following weekend, Daniel disappeared again, said he was visiting a friend. I didn't believe him this time. I drove 2 hours out of the city, past winding roads and dying trees, until I reached the edge of the countryside. The GPS said there was a small property nearby registered under his name. And then I saw it, a quaint little house behind a rusted gate. The kind of house that would look charming in another context, but in that moment, it felt like a wound. Curtains drawn, chimney cold, the silence too thick to breathe. I didn't get out of the car. I couldn't. Because in one of the windows, I saw movement, a flicker of shadow, a woman's silhouette passing by. My chest tightened. Maybe it was my imagination, maybe it was. I drove away before I could find out. That night when Daniel came home, he looked tired but not surprised, as if he knew I'd seen something. He poured himself a drink, sat in silence, and then looked at me with a faint smile. "You went there, didn't you?" I froze. He didn't yell, he didn't even sound angry, just disappointed. "I told you not to." "Who is she?" I whispered. He set the glass down. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." My voice cracked, trembling with all the questions I'd buried for months. Why the lies? Why the secrecy? Who's in that house? He stood there silent. His eyes glistened, but he said nothing. Do you love her? I asked, my voice breaking. Finally, he spoke. I love you, but you have to trust me, Evelyn. Please, just don't go there again. And then he walked out. That was the night I learned that silence could hurt more than words ever could. Days turned into weeks. We barely spoke. He slept on the couch most nights. I cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear. Every glance felt like a question. Every smile felt rehearsed. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't, because despite everything, I still loved him. And love, real, desperate love, doesn't die easily. Then one morning, I woke to find him in the kitchen, making pancakes, humming our song. His eyes were tired but softer somehow. Let's start over, he said quietly. No more lies, I'll do better. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. So I smiled, nodded, and we went on like nothing happened. But something inside me had shifted. The trust we once had was cracked, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't stop wondering what was behind that locked door in the countryside. A year later, everything changed. We were at a family dinner when my mother asked if we had plans to buy a bigger house. Daniel smiled politely and said, maybe soon, though I've already got a little place for peace and quiet. Her eyes lit up. Oh, the country house, Evelyn told me about it. I saw him tense immediately. The smile disappeared. You told her? He asked, quietly, too quietly. I just mentioned it. He excused himself from the table and didn't speak to me the entire drive home. When we got there, he packed a small bag. I need to be alone, he said, voice shaking. Please don't follow me, and don't open that door. I ran to him, clutching his arm. Daniel, please talk to me. He looked at me one last time, eyes full of something between love and sorrow. One day you'll understand, he whispered, but not now. And then he was gone. That was the last time I saw him alive. The next time I saw his face, it was pale and still, framed by white flowers at his funeral. A car accident, they said, instant death. People called it tragic, I called it unfinished. Because he left me with nothing but questions, silence, and that damn key to a house I was never meant to open. In the weeks after his death, I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up to the sound of rain tapping on the window, half expecting him to walk through the door. His scent still lingered on the pillows. His toothbrush sat untouched beside mine. Everyone told me to move on, but how do you move on from a ghost that still owns your heart? Then one morning, I received a letter from his lawyer. Daniel's will was short, simple, almost haunting. He left me everything: the apartment, his accounts, and the country house. Attached was a note, written in his handwriting. Forgive me when you see what's inside. I couldn't tell you, I didn't know how, but everything I did for love. The envelope also contained a small, rusted key, the same one I had promised never to use. That night, I sat in our bedroom holding the key, staring at the rain outside. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger, hollow eyes, trembling hands, heart split between love and anger. I whispered to the darkness, "What did you do, Daniel?" But the only answer was silence. And in that silence, I decided I would open the door. No matter what truth waited for me inside. I used to think grief was loud, all sobs and screams and broken plates. But in truth, it's quiet. It slips into your life like a shadow, whispering in the spaces where love used to live. After Daniel's funeral, silence became my new language. Friends tried to comfort me, but their words felt empty. They didn't know what it was like to lose someone you loved and doubted at the same time, to mourn a man you could never fully understand. For weeks, I avoided the countryside house. I tried to pretend it didn't exist, that the key in my drawer wasn't burning through the wood like a secret wanting to be found. But every night, my mind replayed the same scenes. The woman's silhouette in the window, Daniel's pleading eyes, his final note, "Forgive me when you see what's inside." Forgive him for what? I started to question everything. Every conversation, every missing weekend, every soft smile that now felt rehearsed. And the more I remembered, the more the cracks in our marriage became painfully clear. It began long before the funeral, before the key, before death gave me permission to ask questions. There were moments I ignored because they didn't fit the story I wanted to believe, like how Daniel never let me meet his extended family. "They're complicated," he'd say. "You wouldn't like them." Or how he'd flinch whenever children were mentioned, how his eyes would dim for just a second, as if someone had turned off the light behind them. He told me once, half drunk, "Everyone has ghosts, Evelyn, some just know how to hide them better." I laughed then, not realizing he was confessing in the only way he knew how. I tried to focus on work, on friends, on anything that didn't carry his scent. But grief has a way of finding you, even in grocery aisles and traffic lights. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of a man with his walk, his posture, and my heart would race, until reality caught up and left me breathless all over again. One night, unable to sleep, I opened the box of his things I'd hidden in the closet. Inside were letters, photos, receipts, fragments of a life I thought I knew. Among them was a photograph I'd never seen before, Daniel, standing in front of the country house, smiling. Beside him, a woman. Blonde, delicate, eyes the color of sadness. And in her arms, a little girl. My heart stopped. Daniel never told me he had a child. I stared at the picture until tears blurred the edges. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. Then I noticed something on the back, written in his handwriting, "Forever my girls." My girls. That night I couldn't breathe. I sat on the floor, clutching the photo, trying to convince myself there was an explanation. Maybe it was his sister, a niece, someone else entirely. But deep down, I knew. The truth was crawling closer, and I was too afraid to face it. A week later, I visited his lawyer again. I told him I needed answers. "Mrs. Hale," he said gently, "Daniel was a private man. He didn't share much, even with me. But he mentioned that house several times over the years. It was important to him." "Why?" I asked. He hesitated, adjusting his glasses. He called it his place of peace and pain. I assumed it was sentimental. "Did he ever mention anyone else? A woman? A child?" He looked at me, startled. "No, never," but he paused, rummaging through a file. "He did leave this with me, just in case you ever asked." It was an envelope, sealed in wax. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short note in Daniel's handwriting. "If she comes asking, tell her not to hate me. I wasn't unfaithful. I was broken." Broken. The word echoed in my head for days. I tried to distract myself by keeping busy, cleaning, sorting, pretending. But no matter what I did, the image of that woman and child haunted me. Who were they, and why did he hide them from me? One night, I dreamt of the house. The door creaked open, and a small girl's laughter echoed through empty rooms. Daniel stood there, smiling sadly, holding a child's toy in his hand. When I reached for him, he vanished, leaving me alone in the dark. I woke up crying. That morning, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living in the fog of half-truths. I needed to know who he really was. I started small, tracing receipts, old calls, bits of paper he'd kept. Most led nowhere. Until one caught my eye, a hospital bill from 3 years ago. It wasn't in his name. It was for someone named Anna Williams. My stomach dropped. That name, I remembered hearing it once. During one of our early dates, Daniel had mentioned an Anna in passing. "She was important to me," he'd said, "but she's gone now." I'd assumed he meant a breakup, an ex. I never asked more. The bill was dated a few months before we got married. I found the hospital online, dialed the number, and tried not to sound desperate. "Hi, I'm trying to locate records for a family member, Anna Williams. She might have been a patient a few years ago." The nurse hesitated. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't disclose that information." "Please," I whispered. "It's important. She was connected to my late husband." A pause, then quietly, "All I can tell you is that she was a long-term psychiatric patient. She passed away 2 years ago." The room spun. Psychiatric patient. Passed away. My throat closed, but I forced myself to ask, did she have any family? Another pause. Only a partner on file, a Mr. Daniel Hale. I hung up before the tears came. For hours, I sat in silence, staring at nothing. Daniel had been visiting a woman in a psychiatric hospital, a woman he once loved, a woman who had died before he did. And suddenly, everything made sense, the secrecy, the house, the guilt in his eyes. But the photo still haunted me. Who was the child? I needed to know more. A few days later, I visited the countryside house again. the same road, the same rusted gate. But this time, I didn't stop at the edge. I parked, got out, and walked up the path. The house loomed in front of me, quiet and patient, as if it had been waiting. The door was locked. I didn't try to open it, not yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I walked around the property. Through the window, I saw faint outlines, picture frames, shelves, a vase with dried flowers. Everything looked frozen in time. I pressed my hand against the glass and whispered, "Who were you, Anna?" There was no answer, just the sound of wind moving through the trees. Before leaving, I noticed something carved into the wooden porch, initials, D+A+L. 3 letters. Daniel, Anna, and L. The child. That night, I found myself talking to Daniel, as if he were still there. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered to the darkness. "Why did you make me feel like the stranger in your life?" I imagined him sitting in his favorite chair, running a hand through his hair, saying softly, "Because I didn't want you to see me as broken." I sobbed until my chest ached. The next few weeks passed in a haze of confusion and guilt. I began to realize how much of our marriage had been built on half-truths, not all his fault, maybe, but lies nonetheless. Every time he said, "I love you," I wondered if part of him was loving someone else, somewhere else. One evening, I found his old journal in a drawer, small, leather-bound, the edges worn. My fingers hesitated before opening it. The first page was filled with his handwriting. For when the silence becomes too heavy to bear. Most of the entries were about me, our first date, our laughter, the way I smiled when nervous. But then, halfway through, the tone shifted. "Anna isn't getting better. The doctors say she still talks to Lily every night. I tried to tell her Lily is gone, but she just cries. God forgive me, I can't do this anymore." Lily, the missing letter, the child. I felt the air leave my lungs. I turned the page. If Evelyn ever finds out, she'll never forgive me. But how do I stop loving a memory? My vision blurred with tears. He had been living 2 lives, one with me, one haunted by the ghosts of another family. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just sorrow. That night, I dreamt again. This time, Anna was sitting by a window, humming softly. A child's laughter echoed through the house. Daniel stood behind her, his face pale, his hands trembling. When he turned to me, his voice was soft. "I couldn't let her go, Evelyn. Would you have?" I woke up gasping. The next morning, I drove back to the house. I didn't care about promises anymore. I didn't care about fear. I needed to know the truth, all of it. The key felt cold in my hand as I approached the door. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger. I whispered to myself, "You wanted the truth, remember?" And with a deep breath, I slid the key into the lock. The door clicked. My heart pounded as I pushed it open. The smell of dust and roses filled the air. And in that moment, standing on the threshold of the life Daniel hid from me, I realized love doesn't die with the person. It lingers in the lies they leave behind. The moment the lock clicked open, a sound escaped my throat, something between a gasp and a sob. The heavy door creaked as I pushed it slowly, its hinges crying out after years of silence. A rush of stale air spilled out, carrying the faint smell of dust, old books, and something sweet lavender. My heart hammered against my ribs. For a moment, I just stood there on the threshold, the wind behind me whispering through the trees, urging me forward and warning me back at the same time. The same house that Daniel had forbidden me to enter, his secret house, now stood before me, holding all the answers he'd taken to his grave. The light was dim, only what filtered through cracked curtains. I stepped inside, every board beneath my shoes groaning as if in protest. My hands brushed against the wall, smooth, cold, familiar somehow. "Daniel," I whispered his name, not sure if I was asking for permission or forgiveness. The front room was small but meticulously kept. A gray couch faced a stone fireplace, the mantel lined with picture frames, turned face down. My fingers shook as I picked one up, wiping away the dust. A photograph of Daniel, smiling, younger, carefree. Beside him stood the woman from the photo I'd found, Anna. Her smile was soft, almost shy, her hand resting protectively on the shoulder of a little girl. "Lily." The room spun for a second. My knees went weak, and I gripped the edge of the mantel to keep from collapsing. There they were, his other life, his first family, the family he never told me about. I whispered, "You had a whole life before me, and you never told me why you buried it." I moved through the house slowly, touching everything, the old clock ticking faintly on the wall, the bookshelf filled with children's fairy tales, a small basket of dried flowers. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt preserved, like someone had tried to freeze time. In the kitchen, 2 mugs sat neatly beside the sink, as if waiting to be used again. A note on the fridge, the ink faded. "Don't forget Lily's medicine." Tears welled up before I could stop them. My throat tightened. Who were you, Daniel? The deeper I went into the house, the more it began to feel like walking into someone's memories. The air carried that bittersweet weight, love and loss stitched into every corner. Then I saw the door at the end of the hall, painted white, smaller than the others with stickers peeling off. Tiny stars. A heart. The faint letters Lily spelled out in faded pink paint. My chest constricted. I turned the doorknob. The hinges groaned as it opened into a small, soft-colored room, pale yellow walls, a tiny bed with a teddy bear sitting upright in the middle, a rocking chair near the window. Dust danced in the sunlight like ghosts of laughter. I stepped inside, every breath heavier than the last. There were drawings on the wall, stick figures, a man, a woman, and a child holding hands. Above them, in clumsy crayon letters, me, mommy, and daddy. My vision blurred. I ran my fingers over the childish scrawl, tracing each line like a prayer. So it was true. Daniel had a daughter. And she was gone. I sat on the floor for a long time, holding the teddy bear, rocking back and forth in silence. The house creaked gently around me like it was breathing. My mind screamed for answers. Why did he hide this from me? Why keep this house like a shrine? On the nightstand, there was a photo frame lying face down. I turned it over carefully. Daniel again, holding the little girl in his arms. She looked to be about 5, laughing as he lifted her into the air. His smile, I had never seen it that pure before. It broke something in me. He had loved her, he had loved them both. But why did it have to become a secret? Why did he erase them from his life, and from me? I found a small box under the bed, wooden, hand-carved with lilies etched into the lid. Inside were letters, folded neatly, tied with a ribbon. The top one was addressed to my little sunshine. I unfolded it carefully. "Lily, Daddy misses you every day. I wish I could hear your laugh again. I wish I could take your pain instead. Mommy is well, but I'll take care of her. I'll keep you both safe. I promise." The date on the letter was 8 years ago, long before Daniel met me. I sank to the floor, clutching the paper. The words blurred as tears spilled down my face. He had been writing letters to a dead child. As I moved to stand, something caught my eye, a small photo album tucked behind the dresser. My hands trembled as I opened it. The pages told a story I wasn't ready to see: Lily's first steps, her birthday cake, her drawings. And then, abruptly, hospital photos. A frail child with tubes in her arms. Daniel by her side, eyes hollow but smiling for the camera. On the last page, a newspaper clipping. Tragic illness claims life of 5-year-old Lily Hale. Below it, a photo of Daniel and Anna standing together at the funeral, her face buried in his shoulder. The air left my lungs. I felt like I'd intruded on something sacred, a grief that wasn't mine. I didn't notice how much time had passed until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room. I sat in the child's rocking chair, staring at the tiny bed, and finally understood the depth of the silence that had lived between Daniel and me. He wasn't lying to betray me. He was lying to protect himself from his own pain. But the lie had still destroyed us. Because love built on secrets isn't love at all, it's survival. As I walked back into the hallway, I noticed another door slightly ajar, Daniel's study. I pushed it open and froze. The room was immaculate, almost obsessive. Papers stacked neatly, books arranged alphabetically. On the desk, a framed photo of me, our wedding day, my smile, his arm around me. Beside it, another frame, Anna. Both pictures side by side. My heart clenched. I sank into his chair, touching both frames gently. "You couldn't let go of either of us, could you?" I whispered. Under the desk drawer, I found his journal, the same one I'd read before, but older entries this time. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. Anna hasn't spoken since the funeral. The doctors say she's fatting. I visit every week, but it kills me to see her that way. I met someone new today, Evelyn. She has the same light Lily had. Maybe that's why I'm drawn to her. God help me, I don't deserve her. The words hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't a new chapter for him. I was a chance at redemption, a way to feel alive again. He hadn't fallen in love with me. He'd fallen in love with what I reminded him of. And somehow, that hurt more than betrayal ever could. The house grew darker as night fell. I lit one of the old candles from the shelf, its flame flickering like the heartbeat of the past. I wandered through the rooms one last time, the kitchen, the living room, Lily's bedroom. Each held a memory I'd never shared, a life I'd never been part of. Then I found the final letter. It was tucked inside the journal, sealed, my name written on it. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. Evelyn, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you've done what I asked you not to. I can't blame you. I never told you the full truth because I was a coward. The house you stand in is not a place of betrayal, it's a graveyard of love. I lost my daughter and I lost Anna to grief. I thought time would heal me, but then you came. You brought light back into a place I thought would stay dark forever. I wanted to tell you, but how do you tell the woman you love that your heart still belongs to ghosts? Please don't hate me. You were never a replacement. You were my second chance at life. I just didn't know how to live without the pain. Forgive me. Daniel. The letter slipped from my fingers as sobs broke free from somewhere deep inside me. I crumpled to the floor, crying into my hands, whispering, I would have understood, Daniel, I would have stayed. The candle flickered, casting long shadows against the walls, the silhouettes of 3 people who no longer existed. And in that moment, surrounded by their memories, I realized something I'd never dared to admit before. Sometimes love isn't about honesty or forever. Sometimes it's about surviving the parts of life that break us beyond repair. When I finally walked out of the house, the air outside felt different, heavier, lonelier. I locked the door behind me, the key trembling in my hand. The stars had started to appear, faint and cold above the treetops. I looked back at the windows one last time, at the ghosts that would always live there, and whispered, Good night, Daniel. The wind carried my voice away, soft and fragile. And though I left that night, part of me never truly walked out. Part of me stayed behind, in that quiet little house where love had died twice, once with Lily and once with the lies. Grief doesn't end when you find the truth. It just changes shape. It lingers, quieter, sharper, like a splinter under the skin. For days after visiting the house, I couldn't speak to anyone. My friends called. My mother dropped by, worried. But every time someone asked, Are you okay? I'd smile faintly and say, I'm fine, when in reality, I felt like I was bleeding inside. How do you explain that your husband's love was real, but divided? That every I love you, he said to you carried an echo from another life. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and forget he was gone. My hand would reach for him out of habit, and the emptiness beside me would tear me open all over again. Sometimes I'd catch myself whispering to the dark, Why didn't you just tell me, Daniel? The house haunted me even when I wasn't there. Every corner of my apartment reminded me of him, the faint smell of his cologne trapped in the curtains, his handwriting on the grocery list still stuck to the fridge. But now, those small traces didn't bring comfort. They brought questions. Because every memory I had of us was tainted now, shadowed by the ghost of a little girl named Lily and the quiet suffering of a woman named Anna. A week after I left the house, I drove back, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stay away. I needed to make peace with the ghosts that Daniel had left behind. The countryside was quiet that morning. A soft mist clung to the fields. As I stepped out of the car, I half expected to see him standing by the porch, smiling that tired smile that used to undo me. But there was only silence. I unlocked the door and stepped inside again. It was colder this time, emptier, like the house itself knew its secrets were no longer safe. The air was heavy with the smell of dust and something faintly floral, the scent of lavender that must have clung to Anna. I walked through the rooms slowly. Each creak of the floorboard sounded like a heartbeat. In Lily's room, I sat on the floor beside her tiny bed. The teddy bear still sat where I'd left it, its button eyes dull but gentle. I picked it up, pressed it to my chest, and whispered, "Your daddy loved you so much." The words broke something inside me. For so long, I had thought Daniel's distance, his secrecy, his absences were because of another woman, a betrayal. But now I understood. It was grief. A grief he never learned to let go of. Maybe that's what love does to us, makes us carry the dead into every new beginning. Later that day, I found myself sitting on the front steps of the house, staring at the horizon. My hands were numb from the cold, but my mind wouldn't stop. I kept thinking about the letter, the way he said, "You were my second chance at life." Was that supposed to make me feel better, or worse? I loved him and he loved me, but part of him never stopped living in that house in that past, and I never noticed. I started remembering the small things that should have told me. How he always went quiet around children, how he couldn't stand hospitals, how every year in June he'd disappear for a day without explanation and return hollow, distant, his eyes wet. I'd assumed it was work stress. I never knew it was Lily's birthday. I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. At some point, I must have fallen asleep on the porch because I woke to the sound of rain hitting the roof. It was dark, the sky split with lightning. For a brief second, I thought I heard laughter, faint, childlike, carried by the wind. I froze. "Daniel," I whispered, even though I knew it wasn't him. Then silence again, just the storm. Maybe it was my mind, exhausted, unraveling, trying to make sense of everything. But in that moment, I swore I could feel them there, all of them. Daniel, Anna, Lily. And I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. The following morning, I drove into town. I wanted to find out more about them, about the family I never knew existed. The local library had old newspapers. I searched for Lily Hale. And there it was. A small obituary. Lily Marie Hale, beloved daughter of Daniel and Anna Hale, passed away peacefully after a long illness. She will be remembered for her bright smile and kind heart. My fingers traced the words as tears welled up again. There was also a picture, Lily in a hospital bed, smiling weakly at the camera. Her eyes were just like Daniel. I sat there for a long time, reading the article over and over. Then I noticed something else, a line that made my stomach twist. Following Lily's passing, Mrs. Hale was admitted to Rosewood Psychiatric Hospital for treatment of severe depression and trauma. Rosewood. The hospital on the bill I'd found. I closed my eyes, remembering the nurse's voice. She passed away 2 years ago. So Anna had spent years alive, trapped in her grief, while Daniel spent those same years trapped in guilt. It was tragic, 2 people who couldn't move forward, both trying to love through the ruins of what they lost. And then I came along, the woman who thought she was saving him, not realizing I was just another chapter in his mourning. That night I drove back home, but I couldn't sleep. I walked through the apartment like a ghost. I opened drawers, cabinets, looking for more pieces of him, something to hold on to. That's when I found it, tucked behind the framed wedding photo on our bookshelf, a small USB drive. I hesitated, then I plugged it into my laptop. A folder appeared, Lily. Inside, dozens of videos. I pressed play. The screen flickered, a young Daniel holding a little girl in his arms. She giggled as he kissed her cheeks. "Say hi to Mommy," he said, and the camera turned to Anna, who laughed softly, shyly waving. My heart clenched. Another video, Lily in a hospital bed, drawing with crayons. "What are you making, sweetheart?" Daniel's voice asked. "A picture of Mommy, Daddy, and me," she said proudly, showing the paper. 3 stick figures holding hands. I paused the video and covered my mouth as tears streamed down my face. The next file was different. It was taken after Lily's death. The house, the same living room I'd walked through days ago. Daniel sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames. His face was hollow, eyes red from crying. "I don't know why I'm recording this," he said, voice breaking. "Maybe because I need to talk to someone. Maybe because one day someone will find this." He swallowed hard. "I can't let go, Anna. I visit the house every week. I talk to her room like she's still there. And I know you hate me for it, but it's the only way I can survive." He paused, rubbing his eyes. "You once said I'd find someone who could love the broken parts of me. I didn't believe you. But then I met Evelyn. She's everything I don't deserve. and I can't tell her any of this because she'd leave, and I can't lose her too. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop the sound that tore out of me, half sob, half scream. He loved me, he really did, but his love was built on the ruins of another life. I watched the rest of the video in silence. At the end, Daniel looked directly at the camera, eyes glistening. If you're watching this, Evelyn, I'm sorry. You saved me, even when I didn't deserve to be saved. The screen went black. I don't remember how long I sat there after that. The world outside my window faded into nothing. The only sound was the rain again, always the rain. When morning came, I gathered the courage to do what I knew I had to. I drove to the house one last time. This time, I wasn't there for answers. I was there to say goodbye. I lit a candle in Lily's room and whispered a prayer for her, for Anna, for Daniel, for myself, for all the versions of love that had been buried here. I placed Daniel's letter on the nightstand beside the teddy bear. Then I closed my eyes and spoke softly. You were right, Daniel. Love doesn't die, but it changes. It becomes something heavier, something you carry even when it hurts. The candle flickered, the flame bending slightly, as if acknowledging me. I stayed there until the wax melted down to nothing. Then, for the last time, I walked through the house. I touched the doorknobs, the walls, the frames. Every inch of it felt like a heartbeat fading away. When I stepped outside, I turned back one final time. The house looked peaceful in the morning light, not haunted anymore, just quiet. I locked the door. And this time, I didn't look back. As I drove away, I realized that closure isn't about understanding everything. It's about accepting that some stories are written in heartbreak and can't be rewritten. Daniel loved me, but part of him always lived in the past. And maybe that's the cruelest truth about love, that sometimes it's not about being the only one someone loves, but being the one who stays when love itself has already died once before. It's strange how silence can scream louder than any words. For weeks after I left the house that final time, I thought I could move on. I told myself I had found closure, that I understood Daniel now, his pain, his secrets, his ghosts. But grief doesn't fade that easily. It lingers like fog, seeping into every part of your life until you can't tell where the memories end and the present begins. I stopped going to work for a while, stopped answering calls. My mother worried, my friends begged me to see a therapist, but I just couldn't face the world. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, that tender smile, the way he used to trace his thumb across my knuckles when we watched movies. And then, behind him, always the shadow of that house. That damn house. I thought I was done with it. I thought I said goodbye, but the truth is it never let me go. It started with dreams. Every night I'd find myself standing in front of the house again, the key cold in my hand, the wind howling, the rain falling in sheets. But this time, the door wouldn't open. No matter how hard I tried, it stayed locked, mocking me. Then I'd hear it, a faint sound, almost like a child's laughter echoing from inside. Soft at first, then louder until it turned into crying. And then Daniel's voice, faint, distant, "Evelyn, please, don't come back here." I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, the taste of fear and longing in my mouth. But dreams have a way of turning into callings, and some part of me knew there was something I hadn't seen yet, something Daniel hadn't wanted me to find. One gray morning, I drove to the countryside again. I didn't even pack a bag, just grabbed my coat, the keys, and the envelope that held his last letter. The drive was a blur, the same winding roads, the same broken fences, the same lonely trees leaning toward the sky. When the house came into view, I pulled over and sat there for a while, staring at it. The air felt different, heavier, thicker, like the house was watching me. I got out of the car. The grass crunched under my shoes. The silence was absolute, not even the birds sang. The key slid into the lock like it had been waiting. The door opened easily this time. Inside, everything was exactly as I had left it. The faint scent of lavender still hung in the air. The same photographs on the wall, the same teddy bear in Lily's room. But as I stood there, I noticed something I hadn't before, a narrow hallway near the kitchen that led to a small door, half hidden behind an old curtain. I frowned. I could have sworn that door wasn't there before. Maybe I just hadn't noticed it, or maybe I hadn't been ready to. My fingers brushed over the knob. It was cold, slick with dust. I hesitated, then turned it. The door opened into a stairway, narrow, steep, leading down into darkness. A basement. I hesitated. The air was colder here, stale and damp. My phone flashlight flickered as I descended, one step at a time, my breath loud in my ears. The floor was concrete. Shelves lined the walls, covered in boxes, tools, and papers. But what caught my eye was the table in the center, and on it, a stack of notebooks and photo albums. I walked closer, my pulse quickening. The first notebook was Daniel's handwriting again, messy, rushed. I opened it, and the first line made my stomach twist. If anything happens to me, I need someone to know the truth. My hands trembled as I turned the page. After Lily died, Anna started losing herself. I tried to help, but she blamed me, said it was my fault that I didn't get her to the hospital in time. She started talking to Lily's room, setting the table for 3. I couldn't take it. I should have stayed, but I left. I told myself I'd come back when she was better. A drop of moisture fell onto the page, my own tear. When I returned a week later, she was gone. The doctor said she'd stopped taking her medication. I found her here in the house, holding Lily's teddy bear. She looked so peaceful, like she was just sleeping. I buried her behind the garden. I couldn't call anyone. I couldn't face the world again, so I made this house her grave and my confession. I dropped the notebook. My hands covered my mouth as a sound tore out of me, raw, animal, grief-stricken. Anna hadn't died in a hospital. She had died here. And Daniel had buried her himself. I stumbled toward the small window, gasping for air. The world outside looked unchanged, calm, ordinary, cruelly peaceful. How could he live with that? How could he live with her here, just beneath his feet? And suddenly, I understood everything. Why he'd forbidden me to enter, why his eyes always carried that weight, that sorrow that no amount of love could lift. He wasn't hiding betrayal, he was hiding guilt. He had loved Anna, lost Lily, and then buried what was left of both of them. And when he found me, he must have thought he could bury his guilt too, under new love, under a new beginning. But guilt doesn't stay buried, it festers, it haunts. I went outside. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds. I walked to the garden behind the house. The ground was uneven, the grass long and wild. But in one corner, beneath an old tree, I noticed a patch of earth slightly raised, the soil darker, denser. My knees gave out as I dropped beside it. I ran my fingers over the dirt, whispering through sobs, "I'm so sorry, Anna, I didn't know." The wind picked up, rustling the branches above. I sat there for hours, unable to move. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder until I was soaked through. But I didn't care. It felt fitting somehow, like the earth was weeping with me. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the heartbreak and horror, I felt something else. Understanding. Daniel hadn't been a monster. He had been human, broken, terrified, trying to love despite the ruins of his life. And maybe that was his real sin. Not what he'd done, but how he'd carried it alone. When the rain finally stopped, I went back inside. The house felt heavier now, as if it knew its secret had been uncovered. I sat in the living room, drenched and shivering, and spoke into the emptiness. "Daniel," I whispered, "I forgive you, but I can't save you anymore." The silence swallowed my words whole. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. But at some point, I realized something. The photograph on the wall was tilted. I reached up to straighten it, and behind it, taped to the wall, was an envelope. My name. I tore it open with trembling fingers. "Evelyn, if you ever find this, if you ever go further than you should, I need you to know everything." I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Anna wasn't supposed to die here. I tried to get her help, but she wouldn't leave. When it happened, I panicked. I couldn't let them take her away, not after losing Lily, so I did what I thought was mercy. I kept them together. Every year on Lily's birthday, I came back. I brought flowers, I talked to them. It was the only way I could live with myself. But when I met you, Evelyn, something changed. You made me want to live again. You made me want to be good again. But I couldn't. Not fully. Because love built on lies, no matter how pure, can never be whole. If there's a heaven, I hope they know I loved them, all of you. In different ways, but with the same heart. Please, when you find this, let them rest. My tears smeared the ink until the words blurred. I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed until my throat ached. That night, I buried the letter in the garden beside the place where Anna lay. I placed the teddy bear on top of the soil. And then, for the first time since Daniel died, I felt peace. Not happiness, not forgiveness, just peace. When I looked up, the moon had broken through the clouds, casting silver light over the house. For a brief second, I thought I saw them, Daniel, Anna, and Lily, standing together under the tree, smiling softly, before fading back into the mist. I whispered goodbye. When I drove away at dawn, the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, swallowed by fog and memory. I knew I would never return. Some doors, once opened, are never meant to be closed again. But I carried something with me that day, not just pain, but understanding. That love is not always clean or fair or even kind. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's cruel, sometimes it saves us while destroying us at the same time. And Daniel, he had loved too much, too deeply, too wrongly, but he had loved all the same. The morning after I left the house, I drove without destination. The road stretched endlessly before me, gray ribbons beneath a colorless sky. Every turn felt the same, every mile an echo of something I couldn't outrun. Daniel's words replayed in my head like a broken record. If there's a heaven, I hope they know I love them, all of you. Love, such a beautiful, brutal thing. I used to think love was about truth, about trust. But now, I wasn't sure anymore. Maybe love was just another kind of lie, the one we tell ourselves to make pain bearable. I stopped at a gas station somewhere between nowhere and anywhere. The clerk smiled at me, asked if I wanted coffee, but I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. My reflection in the glass door startled me, pale, hollow-eyed like I aged years overnight. I thought I'd left the house behind, but it was still inside me. Every image burned into my mind, the tiny bed, the letters, the grave. I could still smell the damp soil on my hands. I drove until dusk. The sky turned violet and rain began to fall again. The rhythmic tapping on the windshield felt almost like a heartbeat, slow, steady, sorrowful. And then, somewhere along the empty stretch of highway, I realized I wasn't just running from Daniel's ghosts. I was running from myself. Because deep down, I had my own secret, one I'd never told him. It happened years ago, before Daniel, before the marriage, before I thought I could ever love again. I was young, reckless, engaged to a man named Mark. We were planning a life together, a small apartment, big dreams. But then came the accident. I lost our baby. The doctors said it wasn't my fault, but I never believed them. I blamed myself for everything, the late-night drive, the fight that made me leave the house, the slippery road. After that, something inside me broke. I swore I'd never open myself to that kind of love again, never risk that kind of pain. And then Daniel came into my life, gentle, patient, understanding. He never knew about Mark. He never knew that I saw in him a mirror of my own brokenness. Maybe that's why I loved him so deeply. Because we were both haunted, two people trying to heal through each other's wounds. But love born from pain can't stay pure. It either mends or destroys. For the next few days, I stayed at a small inn near the coast. The sound of the waves at night helped me sleep, or at least pretend to. I spent hours sitting on the balcony, watching the tide rise and fall, thinking of Daniel. I kept wondering if he'd planned to tell me everything before he died, or if fate had simply stolen the chance from him. Maybe he'd written more letters, hidden more truths in corners I'd never find. But some part of me also wondered, had he ever really forgiven himself? The answer came unexpectedly. One afternoon, as I was checking my phone for the first time in days, I saw a message I'd never noticed before. It was from Daniel's lawyer, the same one who had given me the key. "Mrs. Hale," it read, "I just found an additional document among your late husband's possessions. It appears to be a recorded statement addressed to you. Would you like me to send it over?" My hands trembled. "Yes," I typed immediately, "please." An hour later, a video file arrived. The subject line read, "For Evelyn, my last truth." I hesitated before pressing play. The screen flickered, and then his face appeared, older than I remembered, tired but gentle. He was sitting in his study, the same one from the house. Behind him, the photos of me and Anna were gone. Only one picture hung on the wall, a drawing made by a child, 3 stick figures holding hands. "Hey, Eve," he began softly. His voice cracked a little. "If you're watching this, I guess I'm gone. I'm sorry you had to find out this way." He paused, looking down, rubbing his hands together the way he always did when nervous. "I wanted to tell you, God knows I did, but I didn't know how. Every time I looked at you, I saw what I could have been, what I still wanted to be. You loved me like I wasn't broken, and that scared me." He looked straight into the camera. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady. "I didn't kill Anna. I know what you must think, but it wasn't like that. I found her after she'd already gone. She written me a note. It said, 'Take care of our Lily, take care of the love that's left.' But there wasn't any love left, just pain. I buried her because I couldn't bear for her to be taken away by strangers. I wanted her close where she belonged." A tear rolled down his cheek. "And then you came. You were the first thing in years that made me feel alive again. You reminded me of everything I'd lost and everything I still had the chance to feel. But I also knew I could never give you all of me. There were pieces too stained to touch." He took a deep breath. "I didn't keep you out of that house because I didn't trust you, Evelyn. I did it because I didn't want you to carry my ghosts. You've already carried enough in your life." My breath caught, he knew. Somehow he knew about my past. He smiled faintly, as if reading my thoughts. "You think I did know? The night we first met, the way you looked at the children playing by the river, it was the same way I used to look at Lily, with love and grief tangled together. You didn't have to tell me, I saw it." I covered my mouth, trembling. He leaned closer to the camera. "That's why I loved you, Eve, because you didn't just love me, you understood me. You saw the worst in me and stayed anyway." A long silence followed. Then, quietly, "If there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this: none of this was your fault. Not the lies, not the silence. You gave me peace. You gave me forgiveness long before I ever deserved it." He smiled again, softly. "And maybe one day you'll forgive yourself too." The screen went black. I sat frozen for what felt like hours. The sound of the waves outside faded. The only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat, loud and erratic. He had known about my loss, about my pain, about everything. And suddenly, the entire puzzle fit together: the tenderness in his touch, the patience in his silences, the way he always said, "You're safe with me." He hadn't just been my husband, he'd been my mirror. We had both been trying to love through the cracks, pretending that love could fill the holes where grief lived. That night, I walked to the shoreline. The moon hung low, silver on the water. I stood there barefoot, waves licking at my ankles, and whispered to the sea, "We were both broken, Daniel. But maybe broken people are the only ones who know how to love honestly." The wind carried my words away, soft and cold. I reached into my pocket and pulled out his wedding ring, the one I'd taken off after the funeral. It felt warm against my palm, even after all this time. "I forgive you," I said, my voice breaking, "and I hope you've forgiven me too." I threw the ring into the water. It disappeared beneath the surface, swallowed by the waves. For the first time in months, I didn't cry. I just stood there, letting the tide wash over my feet, feeling strangely light, like the ocean had taken something from me I was never meant to keep. In the days that followed, I started to rebuild my life. Slowly, carefully, I went back to work. I reconnected with friends. I even started therapy. But some nights, when the world was quiet, I still thought about him. About the way he laughed when he cooked, the way he always hummed under his breath when he was thinking. I missed him, not the secrets, not the lies, but the man. The part of him that tried so desperately to love, even when love kept breaking him. I think we both wanted the same thing: to be seen without our pain defining us. But maybe that's the tragedy of it all: we were too similar. Both chasing ghosts, both trying to heal the past by pretending it never happened. Love can't fix grief. It can only hold it gently until it learns to breathe again. One evening, as I closed my laptop after work, I caught a glimpse of the video file still sitting on my desktop. For Evelyn, my last truth. I hovered my mouse over it, tempted to delete it but couldn't. I renamed it instead. The Love That Stayed. Because despite everything, the lies, the pain, the secrets buried beneath the earth, the love had stayed. In the quiet, in the grief, in the memory of two people who tried and failed and loved anyway. And maybe that's what love really is: not perfection, not forever, but the courage to keep loving even after the truth breaks you. It's been a year since Daniel died. A year since I found the house. A year since I learned that love can be both salvation and destruction at the same time. People say time heals everything, but I think that's a lie we tell the broken. Time doesn't heal, it just teaches us how to live with the pain. It dulls the edges, yes, but the wound remains. Some days it's quiet, a faint ache beneath the surface. Other days, it's all I can feel. There are mornings I wake up and almost forget. I'll reach across the bed for him, half asleep, expecting warmth, a heartbeat, the sound of his breathing. But all I touch is emptiness, the cold imprint of a ghost that refuses to fade. I've learned to live with the silence. I've learned that some doors, once opened, change everything, not because of what's behind them, but because of what they reveal inside us. And though I've moved on in small ways, work, friends, therapy, quiet evenings by myself, there's still a part of me that exists in that house, frozen in the moment I turned the key. Sometimes I visit their graves. Yes, their graves. After discovering Anna's resting place, I contacted the authorities, explained everything. There was an investigation, quiet but necessary. They confirmed what Daniel's letter had already told me. Anna's death had been ruled a suicide. There was no foul play, only heartbreak. The police wanted to relocate her remains, but I refused. She should stay with him, I said. It's where she belongs. So now the house stands empty still, but the garden is no longer a secret. Beneath the old tree, 2 headstones rest side by side, Daniel Hale and Anna Williams Hale, and between them, a smaller one with a single name carved delicately into the stone. Lily. I had the markers made myself. It felt like the least I could do. The first time I stood there, the wind gentle against my face, I whispered, "You're all together now." It wasn't forgiveness I felt in that moment, it was peace. The kind that comes not from understanding, but from acceptance. One evening, I returned to the house one last time. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, the ground soft beneath my shoes. I hadn't been there since the funeral service. The place looked almost beautiful now, ivy climbing the walls, sunlight spilling through cracks in the shutters, wildflowers growing near the porch. I unlocked the door with the same key, old, rusted, the one Daniel had once told me never to use. It turned easily, as if it remembered me. Inside, the air was still. The furniture was covered with white sheets, ghosts draped in linen. The dust hung thick in the light from the window. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. I walked through the rooms quietly, touching the backs of chairs, the edges of picture frames. I could almost hear echoes of laughter, a child's giggle, a woman's hum, Daniel's deep, soft voice reading bedtime stories. In Lily's room, I sat in the rocking chair. The teddy bear still rested on the pillow. I'd left it there when I buried Daniel's letter. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered. "It's me again." The wind outside made the branches tap gently against the window, like a reply. "I hope you're all together now," I said softly. "I hope you know how much he loved you, how much he hurt." My voice cracked, and "I hope you forgive him," I did. Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't wipe them away. They belonged here. When I stood to leave, something on the dresser caught my eye, a small locket, half buried under a pile of papers. I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a tiny photo of Lily on one side, and on the other, a pressed daisy. Beneath it, a small note in Daniel's handwriting, "For her and for you." My chest tightened. I slipped the locket around my neck. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything, even the pain." Because pain, I'd learned, is proof of love. You only hurt that deeply when something mattered. Before I left, I opened all the windows. Let the air in, let the ghosts breathe. The curtains swayed gently, sunlight flooding the floorboards. For the first time, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. I walked out onto the porch, closed the door behind me, and locked it one final time. Then I hung the key on a nail beside the frame, a symbol, a goodbye. No more secrets, no more silence. Just peace. That night, back home, I dreamed of him. We were sitting by the river, the one near our old apartment. The sky was painted in gold and pink. He looked just like I remembered, hair tousled, eyes soft, that half smile that used to undo me. "I didn't think you'd come," I said in the dream. "I never really left," he replied, his voice calm, steady. I looked down and saw Lily by the water, laughing, tossing stones that skipped across the surface. Anna sat nearby, watching, her face serene. "They're happy," Daniel said quietly. "They forgive me." I nodded, my throat tight. "And what about me?" He smiled sadly. "You already forgave me before you even knew what you were forgiving." I wanted to reach out, to touch him, to feel him one last time, but when I did, my hand passed through him like mist. "Don't be afraid to live, Eve," he whispered. "That's what I couldn't do. That's what I want for you." And then, as the sun dipped below the water, he began to fade. "Daniel," I cried, desperate, reaching for him. But he only smiled. "I love you." And then he was gone. When I woke up, the pillow beneath me was wet with tears, but my heart felt lighter. Weeks later, I sold the apartment. It didn't feel like home anymore. I moved to a small cottage near the coast, quiet, surrounded by fields and sea air. I planted daisies in the garden, white and delicate, the same flowers Lily once drew in her crayon pictures. Sometimes I sit by the window with a cup of tea and talk to him, not out loud, but in my heart. I tell him about my days, about the sunsets, about how I'm learning to live again. There's a peace in solitude I never knew before. It's not loneliness, it's understanding. It's knowing that some loves don't fade, they just change shape. People ask if I'll ever love again. I tell them maybe, but not in the way I loved Daniel. That kind of love, the kind that consumes and heals and destroys all at once, only happens once in a lifetime. And though it ended in heartbreak, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Because he taught me something no one else ever could, that love isn't about perfection or permanence. It's about presence. About the courage to love someone even when you know they're broken, even when you are too. One evening, near sunset, I drove back to the countryside one last time. I brought 3 white roses. The air was warm, the light soft. I walked to the garden, to the 3 graves beneath the tree. The wind whispered through the leaves, gentle and kind. I knelt between them and placed the roses, one on each grave. "For you," I whispered to Daniel, "for everything." "For you," I said softly to Anna, "for all the pain you carried." And finally to Lily, "for the light you left behind." As I stood there, the sky turned to gold. The last rays of sun spilled across the ground, bathing everything in warmth. For a brief moment, I thought I heard laughter again, soft, joyful, carried by the wind. I smiled through my tears. "Goodbye," I whispered, "all of you." Then I turned and walked away. As I reached the gate, I looked back one final time. The house stood quietly behind me, the ivy glistening in the fading light. For the first time, it didn't look sad. It looked like it was finally resting. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and let the wind brush against my face. And in that stillness, I felt it, his presence, gentle as a whisper. Not haunting, not holding on, just watching over me. And for the first time since the day he died, I smiled, a small, trembling smile, but real. Because I understood now. Some loves don't end with death. They live on in memories, in forgiveness, in the quiet strength of a heart that still dares to beat after being broken. When I got back to my car, I opened my journal and wrote a single line across the first blank page. Love is not about forever. It's about the moments that make forever worth missing. And then I drove away, the sun setting behind me, the road stretching forward, endless, alive.